All right, what's going on, everybody? I am back with another video. JB Wins here. This will be episode number 31, Conscious Approach Podcast. I thought I'd spend a quick video, discussing a sports matter, particularly a sports media matter. Anybody who follows ESPN programming probably knows who Dan LeBatard is. Recently, at the top of the year, 2021, Dan LeBatard allowed his professional relationship with ESPN to come to an end. I guess they had reached a point in which the contract was up for renewal. That's usually how these types of things work. And, he decided at that point, or maybe it was mutual, they decided to part ways. But Dan LeBatard, who previously occupied the ESPN radio slot of 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. weekdays, Monday through Friday, which towards the tail end became 10 to 12. They took an hour away. He's no longer part of ESPN. He is now a free agent as of today, as of January. What is today's date? January the 16th, Dan LeBatard, as a sports media commentator, is a free agent. And he's no longer part of ESPN. And, to me, I wanted to kind of let the dust settle on this. There have been a lot of content creators and people who have commented on what this means for ESPN, the sports media landscape, and all of that kind of stuff. I kind of wanted to take maybe a week or two to see, after the dust settled, what the landscape of ESPN's programming would look like in the wake of his departure. Because not only is his radio show gone, but a property that is still a part of ESPN's programming, but it's one that was, I don't know if it was created by him, but it was definitely spearheaded by him alongside his father, highly questionable. That television show, even though it's still on ESPN, Dan LeBatard obviously is not affiliated with it anymore. His dad's not there anymore. And they basically just use a rotating list of ESPN on-air talent to fill the vacant shoes of Dan LeBatard and keep the show going. But my guess is it won't last too much longer because that show is infinitely less interesting now that he is not a part of it. It's been about a week and a half, 2 weeks since Dan LeBatard left ESPN, and I just kind of wanted to, based on what I've seen with ESPN's programming since his departure, talk about what I think his departure means for ESPN's programming. Now, let me get it right out of the way. I am a Dan LeBatard fan. I am not a Dan LeBatard detractor. I am not one of these sports content creators or YouTubers who takes every opportunity available to criticize Dan LeBatard's commentary because they feel as though it's too woke, and they've just become too antagonistic toward the notion that ESPN is, adopting social commentary to go along with its sports programming. They feel like the landscape of sports commentary should be cleansed of all forms of social justice rhetoric, and that sports should just remain about the sports. And to be fair, I understand that sentiment. I get where they're coming from with that. But I also think that sports involves human beings. And anything that involves human beings is going to involve some aspect of humanity. So whether you think social justice should be completely removed from sports or not, it's going to be a part of the discussion because we are living in a day and age in which the humanity aspect of sports is being adopted by the sports media conglomerate, and it's being prompted in terms of the rhetoric and the commentary that is put forth both on air and in terms of how things work out behind the scenes. And I'm saying that as somebody who, there are certain aspects of the social justice rhetoric that I kind of find myself exhausted by, primarily because these issues are incredibly nuanced and only one side of these discussions are given the light of day in terms of on-air talent. I've discussed that previously when I talked about Dominique Foxworth's comments about Josh Allen. But nevertheless, they are here to stay. And, if you don't like social justice commentary, then, my advice is whenever you're watching a show or listening to something on the radio and social justice issues are brought up, mute the TV or turn the channel, because it's not going to go away and it's here to stay. But when you're watching these shows or when you're listening to these radio shows, despite your preconceived notions, think about what you stand to lose by having the arbiter of these platforms jettisoned from these various networks, versus what you stand to gain by having them jettisoned from these networks. And that's pretty much the point that I wanted to get to with LeBatard. I think ESPN is going to suffer greatly because of Dan LeBatard's departure. I've been following ESPN in terms of, radio programming and television programming for a long time now. And I can pretty much chart ESPN programming all the way back to the early 2000s. The early 2000s is pretty much when ESPN decided that they weren't going to be just about stat regurgitation, SportsCenter highlights, and reporting on the games. They decided that they were going to get into the opining business, and they were going to create programming that, put commentators and opiners in front of a camera simply to give their opinions about sports. There was no expert analysis in terms of who was going to win or lose the game. And even if they did give expert analysis, the weight of that commentary was absolutely zero. There was no merit to it, because whose opinion has any true merit? I mean, unless you're an ex-player or a coach or somebody like that, an opinion maker's comments, an opinion maker's opinion, if you will, about what's going to happen in the game or who's going to win or lose is completely irrelevant. But it wasn't about talking about who was going to win or lose. It was about giving their opinions on a variety of issues that were related to sports. And these issues would extend beyond the game itself. They would extend beyond the court, beyond the white lines in football, beyond the baseball diamond. It was about giving insight on particular topics related to sports. And in the early 2000s, ESPN saw the future and said, we're going to get into the opining game because there is a general thirst for that. People want to hear people's opinions. Debate, whether you like it or not. People complain about First Take all the time. You can complain about First Take all you want, but ESPN First Take is an incredibly high-rated sports variety show. And it isn't as such because people aren't watching. It is as such because people are watching. So I've always found it interesting when people complain about shows like First Take. Well, what do you want them to do? If nobody wanted to see, if nobody had a genuine desire to view sports programming from an opining standpoint, then nobody would watch First Take. It would have been off the air years ago. But it's still going strong to this day because it's incredibly highly rated, and it's highly rated because people want to see these things. So ESPN saw the landscape and said, we are going to get into the sports opining business. Then, that's when you started getting shows like Cold Pizza and Pardon the Interruption. And, Cold Pizza, which was started in 2004, it began as a general interest sports variety show. Athlete interviews, coach interviews, discussion topics, running back highlights, stats, reporting on the games, all of that kind of stuff. But there was a segment within Cold Pizza called First and 10. And First and 10 was the debate portion of Cold Pizza. And it was originally Skip Bayless and Woody Page, two sports reporters, the old guard, actual journalists in sports, not just gas baggers. And they would sit apart from each table. They would sit apart from each other at a table, and it was anchored by either Jay. I think his name was Jay. I forget his last name. And then Jacobson. Dana Jacobson, I think, was the woman. So it was Dana Jacobson and the other guy, Jay Crawford. I think his name is Jay Crawford. Jay Crawford and Dana Jacobson. They were the hosts of Cold Pizza, and it was either one of them two sort of moderating the debate panel between Woody Page and Skip Bayless. And what ESPN realized was that during Cold Pizza, the ratings were absolutely highest during First and 10. People wanted to hear these guys' opinions. They wanted to hear what these guys had to say. So, to make a long story short, eventually Cold Pizza evolved into just a debate show. and it became just First and 10. And eventually, uh, you know, um, Dana Jacobson and Jay Crawford, they left the show because they wanted to actually, do their own version of SportsCenter, and ESPN had other plans in mind for the show. So First and 10 eventually evolved into First Take, and you have what you have now, which is 2 hours of a debate show. ESPN was at the forefront of that. They realized that there was a genuine curiosity with regards to the public's consumption of sports content, and they saw that people wanted to watch shows like that. So I'm bringing that up to say that from First Take and shows like PTI came the evolution of what you see now with ESPN, where you have shows like the aforementioned highly questionable High Noon, which was canceled, with um, Bomani Jones and Pablo S. Torre, shows like Dan LeBatard's radio show, shows like Jalen and Jacoby, general interest sports shows where people aren't necessarily experts or reporting on the games, but they are opining on interests within the context of sports. And, I feel like Dan LeBatard was really at the forefront of making sports less about the arbitrary nature of sports. I always, one thing, watching sports for me, sports content, I became disenchanted with sports content, and for me, my consumption of sports became purely about watching the games. Once the games were over, I had no desire to watch SportsCenter or anything else on ESPN because it was, I was bombarded with nothing but sports takes, highlights, self-righteous opinions about why a guy is not good versus why he is good. And I just got over it. Like, who needs to watch NFL Live and NFL Primetime and Sunday NFL Countdown? Those are three NFL shows that essentially do the same thing. There's no difference from one to the next other than the on-air talent who's on those shows. And ESPN after a while became bogged down in just the boring rigmarole of let's talk about the game, let's talk about the athletes, let's talk about the coaches, sports speak in the locker room, riding for your teammates and all of that kind of ridiculous stuff that's quite frankly boring. And I think by the ratings, you can tell that no one really wants to actually sit down for 30 minutes, an hour, or even 2 hours just to be inundated with that kind of stuff. But opinions and funny and comedy, oh, people are here for that all day. So when you infuse sports with things like jokes and funny and just making things lighthearted, you have what to me is a match made in heaven in terms of getting more people interested in sports commentary and not just watching the games. To me, Dan LeBatard was at the forefront of that, and I think it's sad to see him go because his radio show was absolutely hilarious. And again, I'll say that I am someone who I can empathize with those who felt like towards the end of Dan LeBatard's run, there was just a little bit too much of the woke social justice stuff going on. I completely get it. But at the same time, what do you stand to lose by his departure? And when you juxtapose that to what you stand to gain from his departure, where do you really come out on top, with him sticking around or with him being gone? The fact that he's gone, I think it leaves a gaping hole with respect to ESPN programming. And I don't know that it can be filled because I don't know that they'll be able to find someone who is as bold as he to spend 2 to 3 hours on a radio show making fun of sports, because a lot of times sports is funny. And so, first of all, it was great because there were a lot of minorities on his show. And I think that's another thing about him that was vastly underappreciated. You can say what you want about his commentary, but you cannot deny the fact that someone such as myself, I appreciated Dan LeBatard because, when you watched Highly Questionable, it was him and his pops. And at first, for the longest, it was Bomani Jones before Bomani Jones left to go to New York to do High Noon with Pablo S. Torre. But once Bomani Jones left, it was, Pablo S. Torre, or it was Amin El Hassan, or it was Michael Smith or Jamel Hill, or it was, Mina Kimes, or it was Katie Nolan. It was always a minority or a woman who was opposite the desk on Highly Questionable, and I appreciated that because as someone who appreciates the art of content creation and being in the content game, as far as we have come, I still think that there is a dearth of non-white sports commentators navigating the sports commentary landscape, non-white or female. You have your pick. As far as we've come, there is still not enough of it. And someone such as myself in the position that I'm in, whenever I get a chance to see that, I greatly appreciate it. And that is me saying that despite the fact that I don't agree with a lot of the takes from those very commentators, Jamel Hill and, some of the other women, come to mind immediately when I make that point. But the fact is, progress is something that matters. And when you talk about a society that believes an industry is constructed in one way specifically, when you get to, with your own eyes, see that that is not necessarily the case, because you can have black people, or you can have women, or you can have, people of Arabic descent or Latinos, on a major ESPN programming television show, it speaks volumes. You cannot diminish the impact of that. So, that is another regard that I greatly appreciated Dan LeBatard for, because it was clear that that was intentional. That was something that he did on purpose, because he wanted to, I think, send that message to people like, hey, this game is extremely multifaceted. It's a melting pot, and it's high time that the arbiters of the commentary of sports make that known. And he was one of the people who were making that known, and I appreciated him for it. But even beyond that, guys, his radio show was hilarious. I would tune into a radio show before his for maybe 15, 20 minutes before I tuned it out, because I cannot listen to 30 minutes. I cannot listen to 2 to 3 hours of your self-righteous opinions and what appeals to your sense of sportsmanship by talking about how a guy let his teammates down, or how this guy shouldn't be going out because he has an obligation to his team, or how he needs to behave this kind of way. Sports commentators, try to, for the longest time, sports commentators would strip the individuality away from sports, almost making it seem like athletes were robotic. You can only, show the kind of emotions that, are, commiserate with emotions that we think that athletes should show within the context of the game. It was all coaches speak, locker room this, teammates that, blah, blah, blah. And, his radio show was a departure from that. If something was funny, they talk about it and joke about it. If something was dumb or stupid, or LeBatard was somebody who was not afraid to go against the grain with respect to trying to appeal to the general sense of sportsmanship, because he felt that it was, largely arbitrary and, quite frankly, stupid. And I agree with that. I feel the same exact way. Like, why are we getting all bent out of shape because, a professional athlete had a bad game and decided to, still retain a semblance of a social life and go out to a club or to a strip club? Like, who cares? The only reason why these are issues is because we have constructed this ideal of what is appropriate with respect to an athlete's behavior and sportsmanship. And, we have, basically brainwashed the entire population to adhere to those standards, to the point where we believe that if a professional athlete has a bad game, you shouldn't actually do anything that's fun, because it's going to be received, not so kindly in the media. And even though those dynamics are still in play and those things still happen, LeBatard is somebody who, at least, with respect to his show, would say that's dumb. It's not that big of a deal to me. The only reason why you people think it's such a big deal is because it, sort of it sort of rubs you the wrong way because it doesn't appeal to your sensibilities with respect to sportsmanship. He was just somebody who was a contrarian in that regard, and I always appreciated him for it. And I don't foresee anyone being able to fill those shoes, quite frankly. And I just think that it's a big time loss. I mean, his radio show was great, and I thought that it was sad the way that they marginalized it towards the end, taking an hour away and making it a 2-hour show instead of a 3-hour show, removing the simulcast, relegating the simulcast of the show to ESPN Plus, taking it off of ESPN News in favor of more SportsCenter. I'm not exactly sure what the point of that is, but it is what it is. But to be fair, they did that with their entire radio slate, so none of these radio shows are now being simulcast on ESPN News the way that they used to be. They're all now, in the recesses of ESPN Plus, where ain't nobody gonna watch them, not even the people who subscribe to ESPN Plus. So, I think the major point is, whether you think Dan LeBatard was too woke or too social justice oriented, I think what ESPN stands to lose by his departure is far greater than what ESPN stands to gain from his departure. And I mean, the show was it was classic entertainment. I can go on and on talking about how hilarious his radio show was, how funny, highly questionable was with him and Poppy, his dad. And seeing him and his dad do a television show on ESPN was something that was just, if you can't appreciate the trailblazing aspect of that, regardless of whether you have a problem with his commentary, then, I got nothing for you. You'll just be a Dan LeBatard detractor. But, and I can just go on down the list here. I mean, segment after segment, character after character, the way they brought entertainment and the funny to sports is something that, to me, is irreplaceable. Just because I just don't see anyone else from an on-air talent standpoint being able to replicate that. And, just to kind of put it all, into context, it wasn't just him, Dan LeBatard, that was making this happen. He was a principal figure, but, he had, John Wiener, Stu Gatz, Mike Ryan, who's an incredible producer. And, I hope all of those guys continue to do well, as they venture off into, sports commentary free agency. I'm pretty sure at some point they'll find a new home. But, I hope nothing but the best for everyone who was involved in that show, because they all really made it a wonderful thing. I would sit there and listen to that show for an entire 3 hours. I mean, sure, there were certain days where Dan was kind of on fire with, talking about racism and trying to go at the white man and the status quo. And on those days, I just kind of, muted it. I muted the show until he stopped. It's that simple. But you just got to take the good with the bad, or I would just go and watch First Take. And once they calmed down and moved on to something else, then I turned back. It's not that hard to make adjustments on the fly when you're being hit with a certain type of messaging that you just don't necessarily want to be hit by. But whether, and these are just some of the things that I wrote down off the top of my head. But when you talk about things like Stat of the Day, the club, Show Killer, the Suey Awards, Ron McGill, they had an animal segment where they brought Ron McGill from Zoo Miami on a sports radio show to talk about animals. And they would have callers come in and ask animal questions. And in the midst of that, they would be joking and laughing and just kind of making light of things. It was just a great incorporation of alternative types of content within the context of sports. And I don't understand why people would have such a problem with that. Even Stu Gatz's weekend observations, the dirty demon of debate, the cowardly angel of nuance, Greg Cody's Back in My Day, the useless sound montage, the funniest thing from the sports weekend. These were all hilarious, either segments of their show or characters that were a part of their show that just made it a joy, quite frankly, and a delight to both watch and listen to. And I know Dan himself wasn't really a fan of the television aspect of what he did. He was someone who enjoyed the freedom of radio. There are certain constrictive aspects of television that make opining and doing content not as much fun as simply having the freedom to just be faceless and be on the radio. But for me, I love the simulcast because watching them, engage in their hijinks was even funnier than listening to it on the radio. And listening to it on the radio was quite hilarious. So again, man, I just wanted to speak on Dan LeBatard's departure because I don't know how ESPN is going to replace that. Not that they even care to replace it or want to. They probably don't even want to replace it. But I think that's unfortunate because he will be sorely missed. If you're a fan of Dan LeBatard and you don't know how to catch any of what he's doing right now, while their program is sort of in limbo in terms of not having a home, you can subscribe to the LeBatard and Friends Network, both on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's also a channel on YouTube that you can subscribe to. Ever since the final show on ESPN, they've been uploading their daily shows because they're still doing the show. It's just in podcast form now. And they've been uploading that daily to YouTube. So I'll add a link in the description for you guys if anyone is interested who, if you like LeBatard but didn't know that this was going on, whatever the case, I just like to be helpful where I can. You can click that link, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. I listen to the podcast upload on YouTube, almost every day because they're still just as funny and they're not hampered down by the Disney conglomerate. So, it's sad for me because I can't watch them in their hijinks and they're not reaping the benefits of mass media, i.e. ESPN, but hopefully that'll change in the near future. I've just always been a fan of Dan LeBatard, and I'm a fan of somebody who is not afraid to say, why are we adhering to these age-old traditions when they're dumb? I'm going to go against that because I want to talk about what's funny and what's real. And within the context of sports, he was someone who did that. And so me personally, Dan, I appreciated that. You got a lot of people on YouTube, a lot of these YouTubers who are glad to see LeBatard go. I wasn't one of them. I was upset when I found out that he was no longer going to be a part of ESPN. I think that's ESPN's loss. And again, I'm saying that as somebody who didn't necessarily need to hear all of the social justice stuff. But what you stand to lose from him leaving is more than what you stand to gain from him leaving. The last thing that I'll say is, I think it was back in 2016 when I started creating content. My website, Conscious Approach, it started off with me writing a bunch of blog posts based on topic areas that I found genuine passion in talking about. Sports is one of those topic areas, obviously. And I wrote an entire piece about why sports in general needs Dan LeBatard because of his alternative methodologies when it came to delivering commentary. It was incredibly refreshing. It still is because, right now there aren't very many content creators or commentators with respect to sports doing what he did. So I still think that it's refreshing to have someone like that have a prominent position within the medium. And I wrote an entire post talking about why sports needs him. And why there seems to be so much acrimony towards his particular brand of commentary. Now, I won't get into the weeds explaining why that is, but I'll put a link also in the description box for you to read that post if you're so inclined to do so. I think I wrote it back in 2016. It's been a long time ago. I've been a big fan of Dan's for a long time. So suffice to say, I think ESPN it stands to lose more than it stands to gain by Dan not being there anymore. But if I had to take my guess, I don't know Dan personally. This is just me kind of giving my view on the subject from a bird's eye angle. He is probably someone who decided it's time for us to leave. It's time for me to depart, to get off this ship. It's time for me to go. If ESPN had it their way, I'm guessing he'd still be there, but he'd be there in the marginalized position that they had him in before he left, which is 2 hours instead of 3, no simulcast, and, kind of because of the time restrictions, sort of, putting him in a box where the show could be less of the best version of itself and more about just getting back to the business of sports. You only give him 2 hours instead of 3. So, my guess is he was a willful participant in his IP, quite frankly, no longer being a part of ESPN's programming. And I think that that's ESPN's loss. So, Dan, man, I'm going to miss you on ESPN, buddy. I'm still, like I said, I'm subscribed to you on YouTube as well as on Spotify. I listen to your upload. I listen to the podcast upload each day. I hope you guys find a home, man, because what you guys are doing over there when it comes to sports content is one of a kind. It's hilarious, and the sports world needs it, whether people realize it or not. But that's pretty much all I had to say about LeBatard, man. So I think this is ESPN's loss big time. But I appreciate you watching the video. Definitely, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Trying to grow the community organically, so I very much appreciate it. If you're watching this video on Facebook, definitely hit the share button. I'm trying to beat those Facebook algorithms. The actual Conscious Approach page is at 55 likes at this time, so it's a slow burn, but I definitely appreciate the support from everybody. It is very much appreciated. You can find me on Instagram at JVWins, JVWINS. You can find me on Twitter as well at JVWins. You can find me on Facebook. The Conscious Approach, the platform is on Facebook. You can search Conscious Approach. You can also find me on Facebook. Search JAVISOGDEN. But definitely appreciate the support. Appreciate the love. Everybody who is a fan of the videos, I'm going to keep cranking them out, so thanks a lot. Definitely like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Dan, good luck, man. I appreciate what you do. I'm a fan from afar. Keep doing it, man. Don't listen to everybody who wants to talk about how you need to go away because you want to bring the humanity into sports too much. Those people can just go kick rocks, quite frankly. But that's about it, man. That'll do it for this video. Just want to spend some time talking about Dan LeBatard's departure from ESPN now that the dust is settled. That'll be a wrap for now. Until next time, that's a wrap. I'll see you later. Peace.